Greetings, my friends. This is Mike Wan, and I am going to give the Susquehanna Mystery presentation. By the Gregorian calendar system of timekeeping, it is September 13th, 2023. This presentation and this information I gave publicly probably 50 times, both in person and through podcast form, through the years 2017 to maybe 2020, and I haven't given it since then. This information, for me, has been my first introduction to publicly sharing research, and I was recently asked to give this presentation again. And I was excited to do so. But I realized two things. One, that I have changed considerably since I first gave this presentation. And secondly, that I've never given this presentation in the format which I'm recording it now, in the style of slides and video recording, which we're going to go and see shortly. So I am excited for the opportunity to retell the story and to tell it perhaps a little bit differently now that I'm a different person. And I'm excited to share it with many people who have followed my work since the Susquehanna Mystery, because I've made reference to this many times, but I think many people are probably unaware of that full presentation. So thank you very much in advance for the witness. And before we begin, I also want to throw out this caveat, something which I bumped up against a lot when I used to give this presentation a lot, and I would get feedback from people, really from all over. The beauty of the internet is people can, the distribution of information is very wide, and so people would write back and they were interested, but often I would get feedback that would say, well, this is, I don't really like the Susquehanna River, but this is my favorite river. And I encourage you to not take that type of perspective in hearing this information. This has nothing to do with preferences. This isn't saying like, hey, this is my favorite, let me go and show you that. This is about information, and really about the way reality seems to work, and or reality has been manipulated. And so by showcasing this information, what I hope to do is, one, in a general sense, broaden a perspective of how this mystery of being alive in a body with ground beneath the feet and sky above the head, what are the parameters? How far do the parameters go in terms of how reality works? Secondly, maybe inspiring people to apply this type of understanding of reality to their own backyard. And then lastly, to bring into a broader consciousness the significance of this river and its influence upon the world. And that statement may make a little bit more sense towards the latter part of this presentation, but undoubtedly the this river, which probably very few people, a small percentage of the worldwide population is aware of, they're all touched by it indirectly by what has been done upon it. So, I guess without further ado, let us begin. The Susquehanna Mystery, examining the relationship between the Grandmother River let me say this clearly, examining the relationship between the Grandmother River, the unfoldment of life on Earth, and the influence of ceremonial magic. So we'll begin with an introduction. Meet the Susquehanna River. So the Susquehanna River is a major river located in the mid-Atlantic region of the United States. They say here it is 440 miles long. I find that very, very interesting. Like, I mean, how do you get these numbers? But anyway, for people who are intrigued by numbers and numerology, 444 seemingly has some implications. It's the longest river in the East Coast, and it is the longest river without commercial boat traffic. So here we can see a general view of what the river looks like. It starts here in Cooperstown, New York. It goes through Pennsylvania, and then it transitions into the Chesapeake Bay here in Maryland. The reason why this river is not a particularly well-known river is because it says right here it isn't navigable for commercial boat traffic, and so because of that, many of the cities, that have popped up in North America happen to be on rivers because for transportation reasons and other reasons. And because this river is not navigable for a variety of reasons, no large population centers are upon its banks. And because there aren't really any large population centers, by definition, not many people know about it. One of the ways which we can ascertain maybe metaphysical truths, if you will, is by looking at physical or material truths and getting into the deeper implications of them. And so in this example, by this not being a navigable river, by not being convenient to develop urban centers upon its banks, it left this river in maybe a more natural state. I mean, it's certainly one of the most polluted rivers, but it's definitely not. In many ways, its presentation in modern times is closer to a natural presentation. So let's keep going on. The Grandmother River. So I call her the Grandmother River because here we see the Susquehanna River is geologically considered to be the oldest major river system in the world. And we live in a time where things such as the oldest and the biggest and the best extreme sort of descriptions of things really capture our attention, the way our consciousness has been shaped in culture. And so oldest certainly catches a lot of attention. And oldest does have a significance, particularly when looking at it from a material or a metaphysical perspective, because we know within this realm a truth is the oldest influences the newest. Your oldest experiences, your oldest memories influence everything that's built upon it. Traditionally, the oldest members of a community are the most influential of a community. The oldest parts of the oldest tree in a wooded area is influential in the entire forested area. So oldest has significance. And so we also want to go into the nature of flowing water and what that represents and what that is in our realm. We can go and make some conclusions based upon that. And I'll be a little bit more clear as to what I mean by that later on in this presentation. But here we go, and we see the Susquehanna river system. And for the purpose of what we're talking about and what is being implied here is we don't want to just look at it as like this is the Susquehanna River, as I kind of highlighted right here, but look at it as a full unified body of expression through water systems. So this would include like all of the tributaries and all of this sort of stuff. Like that's the Susquehanna River. We name it, our system of names things, and we assume that name is, true by saying like, oh, it's the river and this is it. But we're talking, and the river is separate from the tributaries, and tributaries are separate from the creeks, and the river is separate from the estuary, which it becomes. But in reality, it's one unified body. Let's go back and look at the age. I talked about that a little bit. Here's a list of the oldest rivers, and realistically, like we don't really know how. You can't calculate the age of a river. Like a tree, if you were to cut down a tree and count its rings, like a river doesn't necessarily have that same sort of objective means, but we can make some assumptions about a river's age through fossils. But one of the reasons why the Susquehanna is thought to be the oldest, one of the oldest, if not the oldest, is the fact that it predates the Appalachian Mountains, which are thought to be one of the oldest, if not the oldest mountain chain. And we know it predates it because the river runs through the Appalachian Mountains. Water travels the path of least resistance. And so when you see the river go through the mountains, it implies that it came before the mountains. Otherwise, if it formed afterwards, it would have gone around it, just like the Amazon goes around the Andes. You can see here, like the Nile is estimated to be about 65 million years old. The Colorado River, which is said to have formed the Grand Canyon, is 75 million years old. Here we see the Susquehanna is estimated between like 250 and 325 million years old. There are two other rivers on the east coast of the United States, the New River and the French Broad, which are estimated to be just as old. I like to think of them as the Three Sisters. But anyway, so that's where we get the age. And I mentioned a little bit earlier about how, the Susquehanna River is actually, when I say that word, I'm talking about the full-bodied expression of this waterway, and that also includes the Chesapeake Bay, whereas many people may not be familiar by name of the Susquehanna River. The Chesapeake Bay is probably better known. And the Chesapeake Bay is literally the Susquehanna River. It's just in a different form or expression. Just as your feet are part of your body, but they're in a different expression than the torso and so forth. We can see here from the satellite image, this is the Susquehanna River, and you can see how it became, or the Chesapeake Bay became itself on top of the Susquehanna, and technically what this is called is a ria. It is a flooded, it is the flooded lower portion of a river, this flooded valley, and it's an estuary. And so the story which geologists tell us is like something happened 12,000 years ago, and the Atlantic Ocean rose, and that water pushed up and flooded this lower valley of the Susquehanna, and it became an estuary. And an estuary is a region where fresh water and salt water mix, a very biodynamic, biodiverse area. Probably estuaries are second to only rainforests with the variety of life forms which are found. And here is the Chesapeake Bay, and off the Chesapeake Bay is where, this is Baltimore, this is Washington, D.C. We could see this is Philadelphia. This here is the I-95 corridor. You could see the lights of populations right here. It crosses over it. These rivers, this should be the Potomac, that's the Patapsco, the James River, and so forth. These are all just tributaries of the Susquehanna. The Chesapeake Bay assumed its present shape 3,000 years ago. Remnants of the ancient Susquehanna River still exist as troughs that form a deep channel along the bay's bottom, like this. This is the river, and the bay was formed on top of it. We could also see here the Chesapeake Bay is one of the largest estuaries. It's the largest in the United States and one of the most productive bodies of water in the world, meaning biodiversity. The reason why I think that's an interesting statement is, as I indicated earlier, we can look at the material world through like objective material perspective and ascertain metaphysical truths. Estuaries are productive bodies of water. Life proliferates there. And so, as one of the largest productive bodies in the world, we can begin to look at this larger body of water as a means of manifestation. So that's going to make a little bit more sense, hopefully, as I get a little bit deeper into this presentation. So that was the introduction, and now let's start to get into this mystery. Sequana to Susquehanna, the river goddess to river goddess. So let's look at this idea of river and well worship. Culturally speaking, or maybe historically speaking, the Celtic culture is one of the better known examples of what we can call river goddess worship or river worship. But it was a practice which seemingly spread the globe, and all of our ancestors had an understanding of flowing water as being a link to divinity. And within the Celtic culture, there was a river, and which was known as sequana. And we see Sequana was the goddess of the river Seine. So how it was, we got to appreciate looking at this sort of information from modern eyes. Like when you hear this, we've been indoctrinated to understand reality in a different way. And if you really want to get into it, we have to appreciate that other times and other peoples were understood reality and didn't just understand reality, but it made up their experience in ways that are different than ours. And so from that perspective, rivers were thought to be an embodiment of a goddess or a feminine deity, if you will. And the river, which we currently call the Seine in France, was during Celtic time period. It was known as the Sequana, and the name Sequana and the river Sequana and the goddess Sequana, they were all one and the same. Like accessing the water was accessing the goddess herself. We see Sequana was the goddess of the river Seine, particularly the springs at the source of the Seine. It was a destination. People would take pilgrimages to that area for a variety of reasons. How it's normally told that this sanctuary was thought of for healing purposes, but again, my sense is that may be a little bit misunderstood through our modern eyes as to like how people actually interacted or thought of or experienced what they would think of would be holy waters. Let's go on. Sequana is the Latin word for Seine. I think it's probably the other way around. I think Seine is the Latin word for Sequana. seine comes from, or it's attributed to Julius Caesar, but at the very, I don't know if that would be necessarily true, but it's definitely attributed to the Roman Empire. And so the sequana was renamed the Seine, and it was the most famous of the principal rivers of France. France was known as Gaul, so when we say the Gaulish people. And also for the Celtic swan, the mother goddess of the tribe of Celts that lived on her shores. She was river goddess and the living spirit of the land. Here we could see sequana. She was an earth goddess. So this is what I think is really interesting. Like, by no means am I an expert in terms of Celtic culture, river goddess worship, just, some basic sort of research. And a lot of the research is seemingly contradictory, little bits and pieces, but they're giving us clues. So we're going to use these as clues. But the fact that she's both an earth goddess, but her expression is seen through water, I find interesting. But the sequana is an earth goddess that lived beneath the rivers in Britain. So the Seine is on the continent of Europe. Obviously, Britain is an island just off the shores. She could be seen if the rivers were drained, so the goddess could be seen if the rivers were drained or low from drought. She's sometimes depicted as a duck. Offerings were tossed into the rivers. She was originally a continental deity who ruled the Seine Valley. The river Seine is named after her. You could see the explanations are a little bit contradictory, but we can gather the similarities between them. There's another source which talks about the sequana, location Britain. So is she in Britain? Is she in France? Nonetheless, we're just gathering this. The earth goddess that lives beneath the rivers, probably got that from the same primary location. Goddess of the many other river goddesses. So that's significant. So sequana, in terms of, if you want to think about it as a hierarchy, the name sequana, at least, or what sequana represents, would be a higher level in the hierarchy of goddesses, because she's the goddess, the river goddess of the other river goddesses, and she rules over prosperity, earth magic, water magic, and purification. Here is a statue. She is believed to be sequana. Here she is with a diadem on her head and the robe. We'll come back to this image a little bit later. We can see that image. And we also know that the Gaulish tribe of the Sequani, the people that lived on the shores of the Sequana, they also shared the same name. So there was this correspondence, there was this link between the river, the goddess, deity, and the people who lived, that lived there. And so the reason why we're beginning with that is we're going to talk about the Susquehanna and the Susquehannic people. And we're going to begin with this map. We're going to begin with just like from phonetics, the fact that Susquehanna and sequana, they have not an exact phonetic match, but there's a pretty close phonetic match. And when we look at some of the practices and the understanding of reality of the magi, if you will, and of old times, and it's, I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you have the world view that you recognize that the old magi, like those traditions and those societies and those peoples, that hasn't gone away. So to understand their practices of old is to better understand the realm or the time in which we are living. So they practiced something which was known as maybe green language. It was known as Cant, the language of the birds. But it's talking about the power of word and phonetics, like the Phoenicians, like all this sort of stuff. And we know that there's power in the word. First, there was the word, at least in the tradition, which these people practice. So we begin our exploration of the sequana and Susquehanna connection because their names are phonetically similar. And we want to go and look at why this body of water that we currently call the Susquehanna now, like where did that name come from? And so where it came from, we'll look at it in a moment, but what we can say for certain right now is it was introduced into our modern world, and it was cemented in our minds through this document right here, the John Smith Map of Virginia, which is published in 1612. And what does it say here? The river named Susquehanna and the people named Susquehannock are written into history through this freemasonic rosicrucian document. And this document was the primary document the primary map used for this region for about 80 years. There are a variety of versions of this map, but it was used for a period of time, and from this map and from people using this map for name places, like what was put in this map still holds true today. And so what we see in this map, this is the Chesapeake Bay. Remember we talked about the Chesapeake Bay. The map's a little bit confusing. Our modern maps show on the top, they're oriented in such a way that the north is on the top. In this map, we see north is on the right-hand side. This character right here is named Susquehannock, and this is where we're introduced to the Susquehannock. And right here is the Susquehanna River. It's labeled Susquehanna River, and this is where we get the name. This right here is the Powhatan. This is where we get the story of Pocahontas was first introduced, came right here. Like this map has a lot of historical significance. Here we can see a little bit more clearly as to what it is. I oriented the maps. So with north to the top, this is the Chesapeake Bay. We can see the Chesapeake Bay right here, and we can see it's a pretty accurate depiction. Right here, this is the Susquehanna River. Here we see the Susquehanna River, like, pretty good map makers, weren't they? But let's go into this word Susquehanna, because this is where it was named. Like there's an understanding that there's great power in the naming of things from a magical perspective. The person who names something has power over what is named. And this river is being named Susquehanna. And from our mainstream explanation, the actual name Susquehanna is of question. The word Susquehanna has various interpretations, including muddy river, great bay river, freshwater river, winding river. Among the legends and linguistic interpretations of its meanings, two possibilities are offered. So they're saying we don't know. And so there are two possibilities. They're saying, oh, well, here's an Iroquoian, the word is an Iroquoian language word. And here we're saying it's an Algonquin word, Hana being Algonquin and Sasqua being Iroquoian. I don't know if that's a correct word, but these are two different language families. So they're saying like these two different language families came together and they created this word. I mean, maybe that's accurate, maybe it's not. But the bottom line is we don't know why this river is named this way, but these are kind of explanations. And realistically, when you go and you look a little bit deeper, you'll see that different peoples had different names for the same body of water. Like it wasn't universally understood that the body of water that we call the Susquehanna was called the Susquehanna by all these different people. No, it was linked into and sewn into our collective modern consciousness in this document. Likewise, the people that are associated with it, these right here, the Susquehannocks, we don't know what they called themselves. This right here, these are all this white here, and the white here is just a screenshot from something I picked up online, and you know, it's a mainstream understanding or explanation of things. And you know, if there's one thing we can say for certain is that we've been lied to our entire lives. So we got to take whatever we got, whatever we're given, with a grain of salt. But it's also usually the best things which we have. But anyway, so according to the late Barry Kent, historian and author of the Susquehanna's Indians, there are no primary documents to indicate what the 17th century Susquehannocks called themselves. So what we're calling the Susquehannocks right here, so in our parallel of the Sequani and the sequana to the Susquehanna and the Susquehannocks, the Susquehannocks, those people, we don't know what they called themselves. We know that the French called them the Minqua. No, I think the Dutch called them the Minqua. We know that the French called them the Andaste. There are other names, but we're calling them the Susquehannocks because of this document. And the Susquehannocks as a people are very, very remarkable. And what I mean by that is they're worthy of remarking. Much was said of them, particularly before like 1720. They were the most dominant peoples in the Northeast, what we think of the Northeast of America right now. And they were the biggest and the baddest of all of these folks who are warring folks. And so one of the first things which is written about them comes from this map. This map has a corresponding book to it, and it talks about the people, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But it says how remarkable they were. They said that they were giant-like, that their voices sounded like they emanated through vaults. We don't know what language they spoke. There are lots of articles about what was the mysterious language of the Susquehannocks. So there's a lot that was said. I've read a lot of different interpretations about them, which are fascinating. What I've seen is as the area became more and more populated with colonies and coloners, I don't know, is that the right word? The mythological quality of the Susquehannocks became more and more watered down. And what seems to have happened is that much of whomever the Susquehannocks were disappeared in the early 1700s, and what was left of them in the latter parts of the 1700s may or may not be a fair representation of how they're described in the earliest accounts. And specifically what I'm getting at is the fact that they're described as giants. And so you're probably, if you're watching this video, you're aware of there's lots of literature out there which talks about the giants that were in North America. If you look deeper, some of that stuff seems to be fraudulent, but there does appear to be like some strong evidence, like, yeah, this area was inhabited by what we would call giants, people 8 feet, 10 feet tall. And these Susquehannocks seem to be like the giants of giants. Barry Kent, you read his work, he doesn't say anything about them as giants, and all of his excavations of the area does not show any giant skeletons, but apparently the skeletons were swept away and kept in the basements, the real skeletons in the basements of the Smithsonian or other museums. I'm not certain. I think there's something interesting about these people because there's so much written about them, specifically in the John Smith, the accompanying books to the map, the John Smith map. It talks about the Susquehannocks as being unlike any of the other native peoples which he encountered in every way. This book here, which I've highlighted, to me, this is one of the most interesting books. It's not really a historical book. It's the Annals of the Susquehannocks. So it's a collection of all written material of the Susquehannocks, beginning from the 1500s to 1763. And that's where I say, or where I came to the conclusion that there was a change in how the Susquehannocks were written about, because I saw it from these books, from this book, from the writings. And so these writings were not necessarily written about, like trying to be a scholarly works. They were like from people's letters, and they were a collection of pamphlet writings. And so maybe some of it was not true or propagandized or what have you. So you take that into account. But there was so much written about the Susquehannocks as being everything from demonically possessed beings to just overall different, bigger, more powerful, more everything than all of the other peoples of the area. Like there was something there's a continuity in that theme, if you will. And so I saw that from this book. I like this book. It's a hard book to find, but anyone who's interested, I would recommend it. It's great reading. It's fun reading. But one of the most basic explanations from a mainstream mind as to the whole idea of where it says that the Susquehannocks, the write-off of Susquehannocks is giants. So I want to say this right now. You can't see it right here. We'll see it a little bit later. But it says right underneath the foot of this character right here, it says, the Susquehannas are giant-like people thus attired. And that's often written off as like, oh, well, they were giants relative to the English, because the English were small people then, like John Smith was said to be, I think, I don't know, like 5'4". And so when he came across the Susquehannocks, they were just like normal sized people nowadays, 6 feet tall or so forth. And the reason why they were 6 feet tall is because they had a more nutrient dense diet, because they had access to, the fish and the game and all this sort of stuff. And so they ate like we eat, and they grew to the size of bodies, which we now think of as the normal size of a walking around human being, 6 feet tall. But that just seems to be like lazy logic to me, because if it was just as simple as like eating a diet rich in, protein or what have you, which was not readily available to the Europeans, well then all the peoples of the New World, all of the native peoples would be giants. But only the Susquehannocks are written as giants in this map. And there are countless other peoples mentioned, and none of them are called giants. They had access to the same sort of bounty of food. But anyway, so I just wanted to get into that. Oh, we're over 38 minutes into it. This could be a long video, but this is going to be good. I recommend, we're just getting started. I recommend everyone really sticking around for this. So, okay. So let's go look a little bit deeper into the story behind the map of Virginia. So the map of Virginia is accredited to John Smith. And so here we go. John Smith, who was an English soldier, an explorer, colonial governor, admiral of New England, and he played an important role in the establishment of the colony of Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in North America. He was the leader of the Virginia colony from 1608 to 1609. He led an exploration along the rivers of Virginia and the Chesapeake Bay. And it was from this exploration that this map came from. So that's kind of the story. Here's our picture of John Smith. He's best known by most people through the Pocahontas story. Here's the Disney version of Pocahontas. Very well, this is also a Disney story, but nonetheless. So, all right. So now let's go look at this. This is from the book, The Secret Founding of America by Nicholas Hager. John Smith, Baconian Freemason. There's something strange about Smith's writings. He had grown up on his family farm in Norfolk, that's in Great Britain, and he had apprenticed to a wealthy merchant in his teens. He had little formal education, yet his works, notably The True Relation and General History. So this is the book which corresponds to the map. It's The True Relation and General History of Virginia, are written in such excellent economical prose that their perfect style has been compared to the King James Bible. His writings on colonization have been considered superior to Bacon's essay Of Plantations. Did he have help writing these works from a secret society of Freemasons? Did Bacon edit his works? So that is pointing to, Bacon. So who is the Bacon they're talking about? They're talking about Francis Bacon. So Francis Bacon, the Lord Chancellor of England, the first Viscount of St. Alban. So he was a busy man. This is what our history gives him credit to. He is the inventor of the scientific method. It is he who developed the English language, or modern English. The move from Old English to modern English is accredited to Francis Bacon. He was the moving force behind the Rosicrucians. He edited the King James Bible. He developed the colonization plan for North America. He authored the Shakespearean plays. Technology, applied science, modern culture, modern government, mainstream Christianity, modern mysticism, and the planetary de facto language are all traced back to Bacon's influence. All right. So, for those of you who are familiar with Francis Bacon, there has been much written about Francis Bacon being the true author of Shakespeare. There are other theories of other people being the true author of Shakespeare, whether it was Francis Bacon or like someone in Francis Bacon's crew, because he had a big crew, who knows? But there's a theme that shows that there is a character who gets a lot of credit, and there's another guy who is behind the scenes. That seems to be a modus operandi. This guy right here is asking the same thing. Not necessarily am I saying that John, the explorer who we're accrediting as John Smith, was Francis Bacon, but maybe just his writings are. I do want to point out that John Smith is a placeholder name used in the United Kingdom. Is Francis Bacon and John Smith the same person? Again, I don't know if I'm saying that, but I am saying that a lot of what we're crediting to John Smith, I'm suggesting is Francis Bacon. All right, let's talk about Francis Bacon for a moment. This here from Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages. Bacon is not to be regarded solely as a man, but rather as a focal point between an invisible institution and a world which was never able to distinguish between the messenger and the message he promulgated. So basically saying like just because something is associated with Francis Bacon, it's like he is a representation of a larger group which is behind the scenes, which is guiding reality. The world, the unfolding of the world, which we live in, which the normal folks live in. Sir Francis Bacon knew the true secret of Masonic origin, and there's reason to suspect that he concealed this knowledge in cipher and cryptogram. We're going to go back to that in a moment. But we're bringing this up is because this is where it is this map, which, we're talking about Francis Bacon, this guy who is behind the scenes, which is where we get the name of Susquehanna and Susquehannock. Let's go another thing which we see right here. The tremendous import of the Baconian mystery is daily becoming more important. This was written, I think, in the 1920s. So in the 1920s, it is daily becoming more apparent. Excuse me. The Francis Bacon link was a link. Sir Francis Bacon was a link in that great chain of minds which has perpetuated the secret doctrine of antiquity from its beginning. This secret doctrine is concealed in his cryptic writings. The search for the divine wisdom is the only legitimate motive for the effort to decode his cryptograms. So we're dealing with two things as it relates to Francis Bacon, both the writings, and I told you before that John Smith has writings, The True Relations and General History of Virginia. That's the full title of this. And then also this map. And so we've got a physical, like a visual description and a word description associated with John Smith, which we're thinking also, or at least I'm suggesting right now, is really Francis Bacon, or at least Francis Bacon's hands are upon it. And so these are worthy to interpret. All right, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're questioning this name Susquehanna and Susquehannock. So let's also go through the Smith-Bacon connection in a much more tangible way, because just because some guy wrote about it, like why did he write about Bacon? So this is the connecting dots through the history which we're told. This map here, the John Smith map of Virginia, the John Smith came, he was a leader of Jamestown, he went to Jamestown, he did all this exploration, then he came back to England, and then this map was released in 1612. Remember, they said that all of this occurred in, I think it was like 1609 was the exploration. So this is how it works. You got the Virginia Company of London. So the Virginia Company of London is a private joint stock corporation. It was a charter. This private corporation got a charter from the King James, whom Francis Bacon, he was the Lord Chancellor of England. So he was like the right-hand man to King James. And so King James gives this charter to the private corporation, and then these guys funded these two settlements, Jamestown and the Plymouth Colony. The same joint company, they were given charter, Jamestown in what we think of Virginia, Plymouth in Massachusetts. Most people are much more familiar with Plymouth and Plymouth Rock and Thanksgiving. Jamestown happened a good 20 years before that. So anyway, so Captain John Smith was the leader of Jamestown. He eventually became a leader. It's a fascinating story that they tell us about how he became a leader. It sounds like a very Masonic story of that, like an allegory, but nonetheless, the historical story is that Captain John Smith becomes a leader of Jamestown. Jamestown is a funded settlement, a fully owned operation of this private company, making Captain John Smith an employee of the Virginia Company. He surveyed and named the Plymouth Colony. I wonder if I did that as a typo. Was it the Jamestown Colony? Maybe did it both. I made this slide back in 2016. And Francis Bacon was the author of the Virginia Company of London's charter. So he wrote their charters, and he was a member of their executive council. So he's his boss. John Smith comes back with all of this information, all of this data, and then comes back to England after being in Jamestown, comes back to England, I think in like 1609, 1610, and then this map is released in 1612. And this has all of the markings of Francis Bacon and his cryptology written around it. Remember, we're talking all about his encoded, concealed cryptic writings. And so here's going to be the most obvious. In this map, hey, Mike, isn't this just a regular map? I'm like, maybe not. But if it's a regular map, we can at least see a dotted line where it goes Francis Bacon is known for cryptic writings, why is this mirrored 40 found in the map? This mirrored 40. So that's our first clue that there may be more going on. And we're going to go into this cryptic 40 a little bit later. So let's go back to this. We've got this cryptic 40, and it says, if the art of deciphering cryptograms could be made popular, it would result in the discovery of much, how do I pronounce this word? Hitherto? It says if English isn't my language. Much unsuspected wisdom possessed by both ancient and medieval philosophers. It is evident in the mispagination, so the misnumbering of the Shakespearean folios, and the other volumes are keys to Baconian ciphers. So what I'm saying here is there is a precedent that misnumbering in both Shakespearean folios and other things accredited directly to Francis Bacon are keys or clues that there are ciphers hidden within. So right here we see a misnumbering right here. None of the other numbers are backwards. Look how perfect this is. This isn't a mistype. You know, this was done very purposefully. So these are clues that there's something much, much deeper. So before we go on, well, why am I going so deep into this? Because we're talking about the sequana and the sequani as being very, very significant to the Celtic folks of the Celtic religion, and sequana being the goddess of the many other river goddesses, and she was thought to be the ruler over earth magic. Okay, she lived beneath the rivers of Britain. Well, she lived in the land of Gaul or continental Europe. So why isn't she, or why couldn't she, or whatever she is, my friends, is she connected to the New World? So okay, where are we? So we began by looking at the sequana and Susquehanna just being mirrored in phonetics, in the language of the birds. You know, maybe I'm stretching here. Like, you know, that's a lot of energy to, a big assumption to build upon, you know, a relatively weak foundation. So let's go look at this, and we'll see that this foundation might be a little bit stronger than just phonetics. So begin with this. The Sequana, or the Seine, empties into the English Channel in a town called Le Havre. So this is the Seine River right here. It flows northward, and it empties right here into the English Channel. The English Channel is the body of water that separates the island of Great Britain. Is that an island of Great Britain? The island of England? Yeah, I think it's Great Britain. From mainland France or Gaul, and it's called Le Havre. Le Havre is the major port of northern France's Normandy region, where the Seine River meets the English Channel. All right. The Susquehanna transitions into the Chesapeake Bay at a town named after Le Havre. Havre de Grace, Maryland, is a city in Harford County, Maryland, and it's situated at the mouth of the Susquehanna River in the head of the Chesapeake Bay. So this is presented as if these are two different bodies of water. It's the same thing, but a major transition happens right here. And it is named after the port city of Le Havre. So we're dealing with what's known as mystical toponymy. Mystical toponymy. Toponymy is the study of name places, the use of naming parts of the world, of naming Earth, the act of naming Earth and giving it a name. That's a magical quality, and toponymy is the study of it. And mystical toponymy refers to the ancient art of naming having a mystical quality. Michael Hoffman, James Shelby Downard, they're probably the best known modern researchers that talk about mystical toponymy, but it is an ancient practice, particularly significant within the medieval philosophers, the alchemists, the rosicrucians of lore. And so the name places having a very, very magical quality. So we see right here this Susquehanna emptying into the Chesapeake and being named after the same location of where the sequana empties into whatever maybe the English Channel must have been known as. Here's Le Havre, here's Havre de Grace. So we got that going for us. So we also see this. The sequana, or the Seine, flows through Paris, the capital city of France. Here's the Seine, it goes through Paris. If you're familiar with Paris, it's known as having the right bank and the left bank, and what creates these dividers of Paris is the Seine River. So the Susquehanna flows through Harris, not Paris, but Harrisburg, in the capital of Pennsylvania. We're not even going to touch, but I'm going to mention it briefly to know that we could go down this rabbit hole of like what even was Pennsylvania supposed to be as the holy experiment. But the capital of Pennsylvania is Harrisburg, and it also has the Susquehanna that goes through it. And we want to, though the name Harrisburg, I mean, there's a reason for it being called Harrisburg. It's, it kind of rhymes with Paris, and yeah, that's kind of, are you stretching there, Mike Juan? Are you doing that? I'm like, yeah, maybe, but maybe not, because the county in which Harrisburg is located in is called Dauphin County. And Dauphin County is literally named for French royalty, providing this subtle link to Paris, France. Dauphin County is a county in the state of Pennsylvania. The county seat and the largest city is Harrisburg, and the county was erected. Now they're telling you, like, the county was erected on March 4th, 1785. It was once part of Lancaster County, and it was named for Louis Joseph, Dauphin of France, the first son of King Louis the 14th. No, that's the 16th. Is that the 16th? Yeah, I think IV would be 14th. So we could see his mother was Marie Antoinette, and, he was born in Versailles, which is in Paris. We got all this sort of stuff. But we now have another connection. This isn't exactly going through Paris, France, but there are certainly mystical toponymy connections which connect us to France. Let's go another deeper. So we're talking about Paris. We talked about the Seine in Paris, and so let's go look at Paris. Paris, the name, points to that city or that location's historical connection to the worship of Isis. We could see right here, this from like Transactions of the Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain, 1830, the worship of Isis obtained throughout the Celtic Gaul, as in Italy, blah, 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 the capital of the France, the abode of the Celtic Parasai, because Parasai is for Isis, and takes its name from the goddess whose statue was preserved in the Abbey of Saint Germain. Here we have in 1163 the site of the Temple of Isis, which is the location of Notre Dame in Paris. It's all the same. So what we think of right here is Paris. Right in the middle is where you have Notre Dame. Remember when they burnt down Notre Dame? It was an island in the Seine and the Sequana. That was a site of an ancient temple to Isis. Here we see right here the noble temple of the worship of Isis. That was just like basic understanding that Paris and Isis are interchangeable. You can go here, Paris for free. The Temple of Isis, they're showing where it is right here. This is more modern. So I thought you said that it was Sequana. I thought it was named after Sequana. I'm like, yes, but this is where it gets a little bit complex. And so we just want to take in consideration that in the ancient world, and particularly in the understanding of what is generally referred to as goddess worship, is the concept of the goddess of 10,000 names, which is basically saying there's just like one goddess, whatever goddess may be, but she goes by many, many names. She goes by many names, variety of reasons, different qualities, so forth. But when we're seeing like sequana, when I'm talking about sequana and Isis, I'm not saying they're exactly the same thing, but I am suggesting that there is a correspondence between the use of Isis and sequana and the symbology of goddess and river goddess. We're going to get a little bit deeper into this. So as we saw here, there's a correspondence between Paris and the sequana and the city of Paris and Isis. So, all right, let's go back and look a little bit more closely at our Susquehanna right here. And the first thing, we look at when we look closely is like, hey, this Susquehanna, they're dressed just like a Freemason. They got the apron with the fringes on it. We got the apron and the fringes on it. We got the posture, and we got the raised hand and the lower hand. And we've got the crown right here, and we've got a jewel. This is very Masonic. You got a crown and you got a jewel. And the jewel that hangs from the crown is significant of the rank or something of greater significance within the Freemason. And so we see hanging on this Freemasonic, on this Susquehanna, who's seemingly dressed like a Freemasonic, that they've got this wolf head. Like, imagine this. They're saying that this is a giant-like person. It says right here that Susquehannocks are giant-like people. Let me see if I can expand upon this so we can see this more clearly. The Susquehannocks are a giant-like people and thus attired. That's where that comes from. Let me drop this back down to this size. And so this is a wolf head. This is from the writings of Captain John Smith, the corresponding book. It's talking about the Susquehannocks. He's talking of that they wore the skins of bears and wolves. They were like huge people. And one had the head of a wolf hanging on a chain for a jewel. So this is it. So this is the size of the wolf head hanging from this person. So put this in context of this being Freemasonic, this being the jewel. So having a wolf head is a correspondence of this Susquehanna right here. And we can see right here the wolf head symbol in Freemasonic is Freemasonic, and it originates from the ancient cult of Isis, according to the Dictionary of Freemasonry written by Robert McCoy, 1869. So we're seeing the Susquehanna, who is named with the Susquehanna, is connected to Isis in the same way that we see that Paris or the Parasai or the Susquehanna and the Susquehanna, we have this correspondence with goddess happening over and over again. So now let's go a little bit deeper. In Paris, for Isis, we see, or the sequana is a replica of the Statue of Liberty, Columbia, Isis, so forth. Here it is, the replica of the Statue of Liberty, the River Seine, 1889. Here we can see it in the river, backdrop the Eiffel Tower. And we see right here in Harrisburg, on the Susquehanna, is also a replica of the Statue of Liberty. We got right here. Certainly does not have the same grandiose history as this was a gift from Freemasons in America to the Parisians. This is all Freemasonic. There's Freemasonic, this phallic right here. Remember, they erected the city of Harrisburg. We've got these two right here. Now we've got these two, similar scale, sitting right here, like right next to each other. Remember, the Statue of Liberty is Freemasonic. France had gifted the Statue of Liberty to the United States as a gift to commemorate their successful alliance during the American Revolution. What they failed to teach you in school, however, is the Statue of Liberty's Masonic origin and ties to Freemasonry. Francis Bacon is also said to be the originator of modern Freemasonry. But again, let's keep on moving forward. We'll be here all day. So now we see this correspondence between the Statue of Liberty. We see here, another description or depiction of the goddess Columbia. A lot of you hopefully are familiar with all of this, like Columbia worship, all this goddess worship and so forth. And so the question I ask right here is like, hey, is this Susquehanna? Is this the goddess? We're seeing all this goddess stuff, sequana, sequani, river goddess worship. Is this a goddess? She's the character of the Susquehanna is seemingly presented as a male, like those are definitely seemingly male forearms, I guess. But maybe. Let's go take a look. Let's go a little bit deeper. So this image of the Susquehanna that is introduced and made famous through the map of Virginia, like it's just an altered version of another painting. Few people know about this, and of the people who know about this, they haven't done their research and looked at this. Like, I haven't read anywhere else about this connection besides, what I'm sharing with you here. But when you compare them, they're one and the same. So this first image came out, John White, 1585. This guy has correspondence. This comes from the Lost Colony of Roanoke. And then this is an updated version, 1590, so 1585, 1590, and then it is just upcycled, upcycled in 1612 into this map of Virginia. So let's keep in mind that all three of these images have connections to the Rosicrucian movement, and I'm working off of some assumptions here, like at least you have some degree of understanding of Rosicrucianism, just as the fact that there are Rosicrucians, or at least there's a mythology around Rosicrucians. But all three of these images correspond to Rosicrucianism. The map of Virginia Susquehanna warrior is actually an altered version of an altered version. The original warrior is from John White, and it's a painting of an Algonquin chief. It's more than an Algonquin chief. I can't remember the guy's name who it's accredited to, but he's said to be the first native person baptized into the Church of England. He was brought to the Church of England. He was said to be the married to the queen of whoever the local kingdom, or whatever word we want to use, that the lost colony of Roanoke, which is now in the Outer Banks, North Carolina, is connected to. Like, we could go really deep down that story, and connects to like Virginia Dare and all sorts of stuff, but nonetheless, okay. The original warrior was a painting of John White. John White was was the governor of the lost colony of Roanoke, and he worked closely with Thomas Harriot. So his right-hand man was Thomas Harriot, and Thomas Harriot was a student of John Dee. We're going to come to John Dee in a little bit, but John Dee is like the architect behind all of this. So we got like whispering in this guy's here, like John White may or may not have been like in the inner circle of Rosicrucianism, but what we do know is he was the governor of the lost colony, and his chief advisor was deeply connected to the Rosicrucian movement. And then we also know, so that's where this image came from. And the second image is connected to Theodore de Bry, and de Bry is a publisher, and from like the late 1500s, and he was a publisher of the works of Robert Flood and Michael Mayer. And so if you're familiar with like a lot of the Rosicrucian works of that time period, these are two authors who were the chief exponents, and so their work was published by de Bry. So we see that there is this connection. There's this connection for all three of these images, which, indirectly connects to this Rosicrucian behind the scenes. So, all right, we're talking about this because I'm saying, like, no, this is a chick. we got a lady here. So why am I saying that? So let's go. Why were these changes? So we see here, this change from here to here, what happens from this to this, it looks like the posture changes a little bit. These are like wider hips, and like this is sitting lower down on the torso, maybe more of an angle right there. The face changes a little bit. Shoulders look a little bit broader, but for the most part, you know, these are very, very similar. The faces are pretty similar. But when we come here, look right here, we see that the faces, we got that face becomes this face, becomes this face. And the hair remains the same. The hair remains the same for the most part. And what's around the neck, these beads remain the same. But we can see that this jewel and crown is added. And then primarily here, the hair comes down and becomes flowing, and this face becomes much, much softer. The facial features become softer. The map was replicated in 1905. Or this is the 1905 version of how the map was replicated, because I think that this is actually an update much older than 1905, but we could see how this Susquehanna, like look how they change it. Looks like there's a 5 o'clock shadow right here, and you know, this looks like a Cro-Magnon man, you know, but here, like, you can see how soft these features are. And it reminds me, like in the face, like, you know, I'm not saying that it's necessarily like a Botticelli, but like this famous image of Botticelli's The Goddess Venus. There's the way the eyes are, like the looking off, like the eyes are very different here in the softer features. But most notably is this flowing hair. Why was this flowing hair added? What is the purpose of this flowing hair? And if we want to use Freemasonic iconology, because we see Freemasonic touches here, and I realize I'm using Freemasonic and Rosicrucian a little bit interchangeably. I'm painting with a very broad brush. On certain levels they are. In certain levels they are overlapping. And so when I'm talking about this document and I'm talking about some of the characters, I'm saying that Freemasonic and Rosicrucian, like we're looking at one and the same. So, but what we definitely know through the history, which they tell us, that flowing hair is a symbol of the goddess. Where does that come from? Right here, it's called the flowing hair dollar. The flowing hair dollar was the first dollar coin issued by the United States federal government. Firsts are always important. This was the first dollar coin, and they had the flowing hair dollar. And who is the flowing hair dollar? It is a bust of Liberty, of Lady Liberty, of the goddess Liberty. Just for time's sake, I don't have time to go down and describe about Lady Liberty and warrior goddess, but the warrior goddess and Pallas Athena, like Pallas Athena is the warrior goddess who Shakespeare is named after. It's all the same. These are all goddess worshippers. And this first coin is a goddess coin, and we know she's a goddess because of her flowing hair. And this was done by Robert Scott. And as a Freemason, Robert Scott engraved the front piece of Amon Razon, dedicated to George General Washington, for the Grand Lodge of Philadelphia. He would come to engrave for the American officers for the Society of Cincinnati. And, you know, if you're pretty deep with your American conspiracy, you understand the significance of the Society of Cincinnati. Robert Scott was the insider's insider for the carvings and the engravements for this Freemasonic fraternity. The reason why he was the insider is because he was an expert in his craft, both in terms of skill and understanding. So when we see that he does the flowing hair dollar as a symbol of the goddess, and we see the flowing hair done here, and granted, this was done when? 1794. This was done 1612. So what is that? Like 180 years earlier. It's the same symbology. I'm going to suggest to you that this Susquehannock, who I'm going to suggest is the symbol of the Susquehanna. They are interchangeable. The sequani or the sequana is the river, is the goddess, it's all of the same. We're seeing the same thing. We are clearly being communicated that this Susquehanna River is being named as the goddess. And remember, we're going back to this ancient practice. Where did this begin? Where did we start this? This ancient practice of river and well worship. This is of the Celts. And if we want to go far enough, Celtic, the Celtic culture is also strongly connected to the British Isles, where we find this, Great Britain, and the Druids there. So, okay. What is the purpose of worshiping a river goddess? This isn't the practice of worshiping a river goddess wasn't just, there was a reason. And the reason is you're asking for a wish, if you will. The treasures were flung into a sacred lake, to cause a pestilence to cease. So they're asking for something. They're going to the goddess and they're saying, in this example at least, hey, there's this thing happening and I want it to stop. So I'm giving you something. This is, I'm just using that as an example from the screenshot right here. But that's the reason why you have, in this context of you worship a deity because you're going to the boss and you're asking for something. I have this underlined right here. I don't know what this means. As Columba routed the spirits of the Scottish fountain, which was worshipped as a god. Just talking about Columbia, we see the same words, we see the same names. The fountain, the fountain we see right here. Here's your phallic. We're seeing the same stuff, the same sort of iconology, the same symbols, the masculine and the feminine, all of that being played with here. So anyway, but that's not the point of the slide. A wish was granted. But here's a question. What happens if the goddess doesn't want to grant your wish? Enter the next phase of our presentation. River goddess worship to magical coercion. Dr. John Dee and the use of enochian magic to control nature spirits for world domination. That's a big title. All right. So we talked a lot about Francis Bacon. So before Francis Bacon is John Dee. So this image right here, this image depicts John Dee, Queen Elizabeth's personal astrologer, passing a lantern symbolizing the esoteric tradition to Francis Bacon. So there's Dee, there's Bacon, there's Bacon. This is supposedly some ancient wood carving. Take what you want from, all of this stuff is up for interpretation. You can go and read into this all sorts of things. And what I mean by that is is Francis Bacon a good guy? Is John Dee a good guy? Are they bad guys? That is built into this cake which we have, because there are plenty of people out there nowadays. If you do your research on Francis Bacon or John Dee, and there are many proponents, these guys are, these are the good guys, and there are any proponents no, these are the bad guys. But let's just go and look what we see here. They're doing this over a grave, they're doing it under a full moon, what have you. But this is the tradition. What we know is that first there was Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth I, her chief advisor was John Dee. I'm hoping you guys know about John Dee. I talk about John Dee a lot. And Queen Elizabeth, when she left the throne, she was replaced by King James. And then Francis Bacon had King James's his ear. He was that monarch's right-hand man. So these are the two advisors of the English monarchy that are behind the scenes. And we're showing like, hey, these two guys are connected. They're connected in a couple ways. They're both said to be the leaders of the Rosicrucian movement. Typically, John Dee is presented as being much more like magical, and Francis Bacon isn't necessarily presented as a magic practitioner as much as he is a philosopher. But they are both intimately connected in the same projects. Probably the project which they are strongest or most obviously connected with is the colonization of the New World. But I'm going to go a little bit into John Dee for a moment. So John Dee, this is from the John Dee Society. So the John Dee Society is, these are big fans of John Dee. Our primary purpose is to produce a standard edition of the published and unpublished works of Elizabethan England's greatest polymath, antiquarian, and magus, I don't know, Dr. John Dee, to make available to students of Renaissance philosophy and of Dee's Enochian magical system a coherent database of primary source material for their researches. A lot of people write about John Dee in a very, very apologetic way. He was a victim of circumstances. He had a good heart. I leave that up to you. I think my personal thought is this. And this goes to my understanding of reality. Our reality, the nature of our reality, is primarily a self-fulfilling prophecy. That is how our reality works. And so there is a quote attributed to Albert Einstein, whether or not he was a real person, but the quote is, the most important question you can ask is this a friendly or a dangerous universe? And so I look at that as relating to understanding a lot of these behind the scenes people in society. A lot of what they do is obviously out of harmony with the realm in which we live, but I do not ascertain like bad guy, good, or subscribe bad guy, good guy, me versus them sort of viewpoints to it, because ultimately like this is a self-fulfilling prophecy realm, and I'm not trying to self-prophesize like, good guy, bad guy. So anyway, so John Dee. So this from the John Dee website. Visionary of the British Empire, coined the word Britannia and developed a plan for the British Navy. So it's underneath the vision of John Dee that the British Empire came into play, and it is under the vision of Francis Bacon that John Dee's British Empire takes route, or is grounded into reality. John Dee is the first to apply Euclid geometry to navigation. He trained the great navigators, developed the maps, and charted the northeast and northwest passages. So it was John Dee who trained all of the explorers, the British explorers. Britain was a tiny, impoverished nation who was 100 years behind Spain and Portugal as it related to exploration. And they leapfrogged all of those guys, their navigators did, and they took over the world. They created the British Empire, the empire in which the sun never sets. And all this came from Johnny D. Rockefeller. An angel conjurer with his, so Dee conjured the angels, and with his sidekick Edward Kelly, and they used this obsidian mirror, which came from the Aztecs, and they came up with this thing called Enochian magic. That's said to him. He was the founder of the Rosicrucian order. I think Rosicrucian's a real murky term. Like maybe Rosicrucian order means something different than the Order of the Rosy Cross. They're connected. But there are a lot of people who are supposedly the founders of the Rosicrucians. But nonetheless, he's deeply connected to Rosicrucianism. Mapping mathematical studies for the future. This guy was all about mapping the earth, and he was commissioned by Elizabeth to establish the legal foundation for colonizing North America. So all of our legal world is all magic, all of that is magic, magical spells to justify everything which the legal system does to turn you from a human being into a person and all that sort of stuff. And that same sort of logic, if you're familiar with that logic, well, that same logic was used by John Dee, by Queen Elizabeth, to take over North America. Like, that was how they did it. This all comes from John Dee. All right. But we're going to lean into Enochian magic, because Enochian magic is accredited to John Dee. I don't know if Enochian magic's like a real thing. Like, if it works, I know that there are books and there are people that say about it. Enochian magic, like the way it was introduced to us through the Order of the Golden Dawn, that's questionable. But nonetheless, it's a thing and people practice it. And like Aleister Crowley is considered the most advanced Enochian magician in the world. And Aleister Crowley is another one of these very polarizing figures. You decide for yourself what you think about any of them. But anyway, Enochian magic is a system of ceremonial magic that's based upon the invocation commanding various spirits and is based upon the 16th century writings of John Dee. All right. So the beginning of this section is called River Goddess Worship to Magical Coercion. And this comes from the question, what happens if the goddess doesn't grant your wish? Well, what wish would she might not want to grant? And let's make this assumption. So this is me just kind of hypothesizing. So let's say that the nature of our realm is there are these things, these tutelatory spirits, these governing earth spirits that oversee what happens on earth. And yes, the ancients understood that all of our ancestors, and they worked in harmony with these deities. And seemingly how it would work is like a different river goddess would kind of have oversight into the, what would, in modern language, the watershed of that river. So you'd go and you'd ask that river goddess, like whatever it is your wish, and you would go and you would make your contributions. You'd be like, hey, I want this, I want health, or I want whatever it is you'd be asking for. And you would either be granted this wish or you wouldn't be granted the wish. Like, that's kind of like the logic behind it. So then what happens if the goddess doesn't want your wish? Because a lot of people, they went and asked for help, and like maybe they didn't get their answers. But like, no, I asked for the help and the goddess didn't give me the answer which I wanted. She didn't solve my problem. And like, oh, how dare she? Like, I'm going to force her to go and make her grant my wish. That is kind of a hypothesis. So we've got this thing called the British Empire. And so they were like, hey, and British Navy, like Navy's like not a good sort of thing. We got like a battleship, we got worship, river goddess worship to the warship. We're going to go all over the world on ships, and we're going to take over the world. We're going to take over the world through strong arm. And like, this is what our vision is. And you know what? We're going to go to the goddess and be like, hey, goddess, we want to go and we want to take over the world. And the goddess is like, what? That's not how this realm works. I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. That's not how we do things here on Earth. And then, in order for anything to happen on Earth, you need to have the blessings of the goddess, right? That's the way the world works. So, enter in Enochian magic. This is friggin' nuts. Now, again, I'm not saying this is how the world works. I'm open to it, to being how this is the world works. But I am saying this is the stories in which they're telling us. We're just following the dots. And what I'm also saying is this is a self-fulfilling prophecy world as well. So this is where it gets really, 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 really interesting. So we talked about Enochian magic, and I've heard people talk about Enochian magic all the time, and I often hear them talk about the practice of Enochian magic, but I've never heard anyone actually explain what is supposedly happening in this Enochian magic. So let's go to Donald Tyson. So Donald Tyson is an occult scholar, and he's the author of many books. Here's a lot of books he's written. This book in 2002 called Enochian Magic for Beginners. He's written all about a lot of these sort of dark, hidden, esoteric sort of stuff. And I'm going to make reference to an essay he wrote, which came from Gnosis magazine, summer 1996. It's called The Enochian Apocalypse. And so I'm using this as like referencing Donald Tyson as, a scholar. I would imagine he's both a practitioner of Enochian magic and, probably a historian as well. For the record, I practice no ceremonial magic. I'm no freemason. I'm none of that sort of stuff. So this is from that. Between the years 1582 and 1589, English scholar John Dee conducted a series of ritual communications with a set of discarnate entities that eventually came to be known as Enochian angels. It was Dee's plan to use the complex system of magic communicated by the angels. So like John Dee was talking to these angels and they gave him a system of magic. And this is what John Dee wanted to do. Remember, this is the guy who envisioned the British Empire. He wanted to use this complex system of magic to advance the expansionist policies of the sovereign Queen Elizabeth I. What are the expansionist policies? The British Empire. And they did it. There literally was a British Empire. There were lots and lots of people who wanted a worldwide domination. The Spaniards wanted that. The Portuguese wanted that. The Romans wanted that. And they had big empires. But the greatest empire, when I say greatest, I mean by size, not by quality, was the British Empire. At the same time, Dee hoped to control the hostile potentates, good word, potentates of Europe by commanding the tutelatory spirits of the various nations. Okay. So I'm going to go and read through these and then kind of summarize. What the Enochian angels conveyed to Dee was not merely a potent form of magic to rule the tutelatory spirits of nations. Okay, so that's that. All right, let me read this and I'll go explain. It was an initiatory formula designed to open the locked gates of the four great watchtowers that stand guard against the chaos at the extremities of our universe. So then we have this right here. The overt purpose of the keys. Okay, so the Enochian keys or calls are the 48 spirit invocations delivered to Dee and Kelly in the Enochian language, then translated to English word by word by the angels. The overt purpose of the keys. So the keys are the magic, as the angels declared, was to enable Dee to establish ritual communication with the spirits of the 30 aethers who rule over the tutelatory spirits of the nations of earth. All right. So this is what we're being told that Enochian magic is. So we're said that there's this, there are these great watchtowers that stand guard against the chaos of the extremities of our universe. And so we are protected from this chaos. And these keys open the watchtower. And they're done, they give the person who's using these keys or calls the ability to rule over the tutelatory spirits. And so we know that Dee, his desire was to command the tutelatory spirits to advance the expansionist policy, expansionist policy of Queen Elizabeth I. So what is a tutelatory spirit? A tutelatory spirit is an earth spirit. That's a definition of a tutelatory spirit. Do I have a definition? Here we go. A tutelatory spirit is a deity or a spirit that's the guardian or protector of a particular place. So that refers in a certain way that of all the different types of tutelatory spirits. We've got like mountain spirits and forest spirits and all of that. But we're talking about river goddesses right now. And river goddesses are a very specific type of tutelatory spirit. In fact, we're talking about Sequana, who is the goddess of all of the river goddess spirits. And we see that goddess of Sequana rules over earth magic. Okay? Do you understand why I'm saying who are the people who named this river? This river right here, this oldest river on the planet, who is named Sequana, It is named by Francis Bacon, who, what did Francis Bacon do? Francis Bacon continued on the practice of John Dee, who was like, hey, we're going to go and we're going to command over these tutelatory spirits, not just the tutelatory spirits of other nations. We're going to go to the oldest tutelatory spirit on all of earth, and we're going to command her, and we're going to make her do what we want. And what do we want? We want to take over the friggin' world. That sounds crazy, right? That sounds like Dr. Evil stuff. Other than the fact, like, the history in which they're telling us, that's the British Empire. That's exactly what happened, right? So let's go a little bit further. All right. In the physical realm, what's the oldest, in the physical realm, it's a fundamental truth that the oldest influences the new. Going to the oldest river. Did they know it's the oldest river? I don't know. I don't know what any of these people knew. But what I do know is they were able to build a really accurate map. They knew some stuff. And they go and they name this river the Susquehanna. They name it the sequana, maybe. I don't know. So here's a painting, 1913. John Dee performing an experiment for Elizabeth I. Here he is. John Dee, here's my magic. Look at all them watching. What I think is really interesting is they x-rayed this photograph, and you see behind here, surrounding this, are all these painting pictures of these skulls. Right? Look right here. Here's our open grave right there. Read into this what you want. Read into this what you want. All right. So let's go a little bit deeper. Offerings to the river goddess, sequana. World firsts that started on the Susquehanna River, which became worldwide movements. So we're just playing with an idea. Maybe this is all coincidence. Maybe it's just self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe this is egregore sort of stuff. And by bringing this into the collective awareness the way we're doing, we're collapsing a grandiose subliminal advertisement. But nonetheless, what seems to happen is this ancient river, which, maybe that's a tutelatory spirit, the tutelatory spirit of the earth. And it was commanded through this enochian magic. These worldwide events first happened upon the river. The creation of the United States of America and the British Empire, which actually I would define as globalism. For what we now think of as globalism, this monoculture, which is all over the earth, has primarily been propagated through either, World War II and the British-American allies, or through American-British companies, or all of these different ways of looking at globalism. We can tie it to American and Britain. Computer technology, distribution of electricity, baseball, and the Church of Latter-day Saints. All of these, they started on the Susquehanna River. We're going to go through this pretty quickly. Here's kind of a map. I mean, this is such a big topic. And I'm 1 hour and 37 minutes into it. And really getting to the geology, I think, is fascinating, particularly like the Herkimer diamonds and the anthracite deposits right here, and this huge underground or underwater crater. But nonetheless, this is what's happened on the river. Baseball is said to be invented here. Not true, but it's said to be here. We're going to get to that in a moment. Mormonism, John Smith, this is where he was baptized by John the Baptist in the Susquehanna River to create the church, this Baseball Hall of Fame, the World Series of Little League. This is where Edison did his thing. So much stuff happened here. We'll get to that in a moment. Here's your first computer. Here's globalism. Let's go through this. So we're going to begin with Jamestown. Remember, this whole thing began with a map which is accredited to John Smith, which is really the expression of Jamestown. Jamestown is right here. This is the Chesapeake Bay, which we know as the Susquehanna River. This right here is where the bay becomes ocean. This is a river right here. This is the James River. And the James River, this is a little bit upstream. This is technically, if you think about it, this is just a tributary to the Susquehanna. But in modern language, we'll say it's a tributary of the Chesapeake. It's all the same. This is the James River right there. Jamestown. Jamestown settlement is the colony of Virginia. It was the first permanent English settlement of the Americas. William Kelso. William Kelso is an important archaeologist, and he's also received many important dignitaries by Queen Elizabeth II, and he wrote that Jamestown is where the British Empire began. The reason he wrote that is because this is the first permanent colony that lasted of the British Empire outside of the British Isles. And so this is when the British Empire really established itself. Likewise, Jamestown is the beginning of the colony of Virginia, which became the 12 colonies or 13 colonies, which eventually became the United States. So it's where the United States began. All of this began right here, right on the same waterway. Let's go look right here. We're going to talk about ENIAC. ENIAC is stands for the Electric Numerical Integrator and Computer, and it was invented at the University of Pennsylvania, but it was made for Aberdeen Proving Ground. So ENIAC. ENIAC is the first large-scale general-purpose electronic digital computer. It is the invention of this first all-purpose digital computer signaled the birth of the information age. This is the first, okay? This is at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. Where's Aberdeen Proving Grounds? Aberdeen Proving Grounds is right here. What is this? This is the Susquehanna River. This is the Chesapeake Bay. It is at the transition between the river to the bay. This is where Aberdeen Proving Grounds is. And if we just want to go a little bit further, the first computer, it's called ENIAC. There's enochian magic. The first quantum computer is called D-Wave. Hey, it's John D. waving high, all this sort of stuff. Happens basically on February 15th and 13th, surrounding what we think of as Valentine's Day. If you go and you look at the historical significance, I think it's called Lucuperus. I think that's the ancient holiday. But fertility rituals, but all of this stuff, it all goes back to these ancient practices, but we got that there. Right here, Thomas Edison, the greatest inventor in history, his first electrification project, Sunbury, the Hotel Edison in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. It was the first building to be lit with Edison's 3-wire system. So this happens in Sunbury. This is Sunbury, PA, and this is the confluence of the Susquehanna River, this confluence right here. So what happened here is the first place that they created a generator of electricity, which then took 3 wires, wire 1, wire 2, wire 3, or positive, negative, and neutral, and brought that and electrified a building. That happened here. Globalism, this is where globalism began. This spread throughout the world. Computer technology. Keep in mind that computer technology, this is the birth of the information age. It was always a military-industrial complex. This is Aberdeen Proving Grounds, is an army base. Always a military project. Don't ever think that technology is your friend, even if we do friendly things with it. And the same thing with electricity. Electricity started right there. Just using, what's his name? Tesla as an example. That's just, in my opinion, a red herring, but there are other ways in which electricity is created and distributed, but this is the way which it is around the world. Electricity does a whole bunch of stuff. There are other ways in which theoretically we could have similar ways of living without needing electrical wiring, but nonetheless, we do it a certain way. It propagated throughout Earth, and it began right here on the Susquehanna. I'm just going to touch this a little bit. Edison was a member of the Theosophical Society. If you don't know what the Theosophical Society is, it's our modern New Age and magical perspective world is really given to us through the Theosophical Society. And we see Edison was part of it. You decide, good or bad, but we see Edison was a big part of it. And that's a theme. So it's a theme because, let's go right here. Right here, this is Baseball Hall of Fame. Literally the Susquehanna River, it begins its journey, its 444-mile journey at the 100 yards from the Baseball Hall of Fame. And we'll see that right here. This is the Baseball Hall of Fame. This is where the Susquehanna River begins. This is the marker set that's located right there, which says, this marker signifies the point where the beautiful Susquehanna River begins its 444-mile journey to meet the Chesapeake Bay, presented to the village of Cooperstown. That's right here, and this is where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. This gets real interesting. Baseball is seemingly an ancient sport. Always a fertility ritual sport with like the ball, hitting the ball and like the phallic bat and stuff like that. But modern baseball, or modern myth, goes like this. The Baseball Hall of Fame is located here because it was said that baseball was invented here. None of that is true. Baseball historians know that, but nonetheless, this is why the Baseball Hall of Fame is here. And the lie that propagated that baseball being built here is known in baseball circles as the Doubleday myth, because it has been said that this guy, Abner Doubleday, invented baseball, and he invented it in Cooperstown. And that was said by Albert Spalding, who was like he may have been the commissioner of baseball at the time. Like this is maybe early 1900s. He said, baseball was invented by Abner Doubleday at Cooperstown, New York, and baseball is an American sport, and so be it. And then Stephen Clark is like, oh, that's a great idea. I live in Cooperstown. I'd love to see Cooperstown become famous, so I invented the Baseball Hall of Fame. And so and this is like in the 1930s maybe, and they built the Baseball Hall of Fame. So this is what you got to realize. The guy who said this, Spalding, if you're familiar with Spalding Sporting Goods, like that's the same Spalding as a baseball player, a baseball owner. He was also deeply rooted in the Theosophical Society. And the reason why he said General Abner Doubleday, who was a well-known, he was a Civil War hero. In fact, he was said to have fired the first shot of the Civil War and said to have been the hero who won the Battle of Gettysburg for the Union. He also was the president and interim international vice president of the Theosophical Society. So like he was like a real theosophist. And so the Theosophical Society was started by H.P. Blavatsky. Many of you might be familiar with her, and particularly her book, what was it called? Isis Revealed. And we got Stephen Clark. Stephen Clark was an immensely wealthy man. He was multi-generational wealth. His grandfather invented the Singer sewing machine. He was a founder of that business, and that's where their wealth came from, like elite insider, maybe not a household name like the Rockefellers, but he was in that moneyed class. It's all the same class. He's the guy, and he was deeply connected with modern art. Modern art is also said to be a theosophical concept. We've got all of this like theosophy, whatever theosophy is, is behind the introduction of the Baseball Hall of Fame being located right here, right at the mouth of the Susquehanna. So like that's on this river, and baseball has spread throughout the world. Here's the restoration site, is what it's known as, where Joseph Smith was baptized in the Susquehanna River. So, all right, so it is 1 hour and 45 minutes. All right, into this video. It's a big topic, as you can see. Now we're going to get into the real goods, and we're going to ground this into something good, or something knowable, something tangible, something we could really work with. So the same hands behind this mystery, behind this map, they also revealed a secret location. And encoded in the map of Virginia is a secret location, and that secret location is the Susquehanna River at the 40th parallel. So let me walk you through this. So remember, here's our Susquehanna, whatever, whomever she may be. And what it says here, this is from Manly P. Hall's works, and he's talking about the deciphering of Francis Bacon's work. Remember all this stuff about like deciphering the works of Francis Bacon. And he's talking about pictorial cryptograms, which I would suggest the map is, and particularly this character on here, are sometimes accompanied by a key necessary for their decipherment. A figure may point toward the starting point of the cipher, or carry in its hand some implement disclosing the system of measurement used. So this is not speaking specifically about the Susquehanna or the map. It's talking about other Rosicrucian documents, but we're going to apply this logic to the map because we've already like identified that there's something going on. And what I'm going to suggest to you is this Susquehanna, who's got in the Susquehannoc's hand, something pointing to the entry point of the cryptogram. And what we see right here at the base of this bow, pointing right here, is this, which is the beginning of the Susquehanna River. This is labeled on the map. I highlighted it in blue. But this is the Susquehanna River, and we see right here the Susquehannock and the Susquehanna River are in the same place. And what I'm going to suggest to you is it's showing you. It's like it's pointing out both the Susquehanna River. Like this Susquehannock is a representation of the river. Like they're one and the same, just as we've seen in all of the sequana and the sequanae, the interchangeable use of peoples and names. These remarkable people who are being called the Susquehannocks are also referring to the remarkable river. And the other thing which we know is important on this map is this reversed 40. And this 40 is actually making reference to latitudes. At the top of the map, it shows the 37th, the 38th, the 39th, the 40th, and the 41st latitude. They're labeled. And only the 40 is mirrored. And so what I'm going to suggest is we take these two and it creates a cross section, because if you're going to encode something in a map, you're going to encode a location, and the location that it's encoded is the 40th parallel at the Susquehanna River. So let's go look at that in physical reality. Here's a map. This is the Susquehanna River right here. And this line is exactly the 40th parallel, 40 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. I added that in. And we can see right here located in probably like this is about 2 miles away. So this is really, really close. A parallel stretches for about 70 miles. Like the 41st parallel begins 70 miles north. But generally speaking, particularly with the accuracy of which they would have had, let's say in 1612, this is going to be really close to the 40th parallel. And here we find the mysterious river petroglyphs. Here it's labeled in Wikipedia as the Big Indian and Little Indian rock petroglyphs. And they are prehistoric. It's a prehistoric archaeological site. It consists of 2 large rocks located in the Susquehanna River. These petroglyphs have been basically ignored by all archaeologists, and it is the largest collection of petroglyphs found east of the Mississippi. It's not just in 2 rocks. These are all of the boulders that are known to have petroglyphs. It's the Susquehanna River, and we can see that there's a whole bunch of these submerged boulders. We don't know how much more is located in there. And we could spend a lot of time talking about the petroglyphs, but we're not. But what I'm going to say is these petroglyphs are significant, and perhaps this is what it's pointing to. But my thought is the petroglyphs are actually pointing to something a little bit even deeper. The petroglyphs are markers. So a variety of people were interested in the petroglyphs in these locations. The first one I want to talk about is Tula. Tula was a Tolteca Chichimeca elder, searcher, heir, and guardian of the oral tradition or the true history. You could see this guy's history. We could see in 1947 he took on the mission of exploring and corroborating the history of the Confederation of the Enochian and the 4 Arrows Migration, which is the great cultural migration from Mexico throughout North America. And he's found evidence of this migration in the many parts of the United States, including Chaco Canyon, which I believe is in New Mexico, the Susquehanna River petroglyphs, and the mounds in Ohio and Illinois. This guy is, Tula is a title. It means advisor to the council. He's the first indigenous leader in the history of Mexico to have achieved, within the aid of his organization, an official government recognition of the native religious tradition within Mexico. It took 500 years to accomplish it. So in 47, he was given that title. I believe he passed in 2012, so you could see that he held this title for quite a long period of time. So this is the petroglyph right here. This is of a character with these big hands. It was Tula, who interpretation that this is a symbol of Humak, who is known as Big Hands, and he was the last king of the legendary state of Tula. All right, we have got all this sort of stuff. And what the Four Arrows migration represents, amongst other things, I'll do my best to explain it. Certainly, I'm not the spokesperson for it, but it's definitely referring to an interconnection between ancient cultures. We're going to get a little bit more to that in a moment. Let me go to other points before I get to it. One of the things another point which solidified this connection of the Susquehanna River connection to Tula, which we would now think of in modern Mexico, was this word cocalco. Cocalco is a Nahuatl word, of the traditional language which we think of in Mesoamerica, and it means the house of snake, and is deeply connected to the origination myth of the Mesoamerican cultures. And what we have very close to the petroglyphs is Cocalco, or Cocalco Creek, which in a completely different language, in the Algonquin language, but it has the same meaning. Algonquin and Nahuatl are not said to be related language families, but they both means the place of the snake, home of the serpents. And here we see a Cocalco Creek, Lenape snake dens, Cocalco, the house of snakes. So, all right. So I want to use this book called Serpents of Wisdom. And this is one of these kind of, I'm going to use this general word, new age book. Things can't be verified, alternative history books. And the problem with these books is you can't verify anything. You read it and they're fantastical, and like the fantasticalness is like it's going to pull you in. But if you do any like real search into like the New Age movement and the alternative movement, it's always been from the beginning completely co-opted by like intelligence agencies. Which means you should take everything from them with a grain of salt. Likewise, there could be real truth in there. So it's like, you meet it however you want to. But there's this book called the Serpents of Wisdom. It came out in 1997. And it's talking about these serpents of wisdoms who are it's a worldwide network of spiritual adepts. This is very theosophical, mind you. Like when it says the solar or great white brotherhood, that is a very theosophical concept. But it's talking about these serpents of wisdom are found throughout the world. The Nagas of India, the Quetzalcoatls of Mexico, the Jedi of Egypt, the Adders of Britain, the Lung of China. They're all members of the serpents of wisdom. And included in these serpents of wisdom were they were in Tula, the same city where we said that this is from, where Tula says that the serpents of wisdom, the final king of Tula, there is indication of a connection between Tula and to this these petroglyphs at the 40th parallel of the Susquehanna River. We find them there. And we also see that the cream of the European crop of the European serpents of wisdom are the rosicrucians. And so we see that the Tulakiel's research points to the, if you will, the Quetzalcoatl connection. Well, now we also see not just from this map, which is connected to 1612 to the Susquehanna River, in this location at the 40th parallel, but we can see more modern Rosicrucians come here as well. So according to, this book of H. Spencer Lewis and the Complete History of the Rosicrucian Order, the first Grand Master of the Rosicrucian Order in the first cycle in America, 1694, was Johann Kelpius. Here we have like this marker of Johann Kelpius built by marking his cave, the first Rosicrucian colony, the Amor colony in Americas. This is Johann Kelpius, and then became Conrad Beisel was the next Grand Master of the Rosicrucian colony. And so Conrad Beisel then founded the Ephrata cloister. And so what we see here is this is where Kelpius Cave is. This is the Ephrata cloister. And what the history goes is after the Kelpius Cave, that colony of Rosicrucian and mystics collapsed. And this is all the work. Ross Ben does a lot of talk of this work. This guy Beisel shows up here, and then Beisel's told to go west to go start the next iteration. He founds Ephrata cloister. And so here we hear about the Ephrata cloister. Here's an article about the Ephrata cloister, which was written in 2002, and it's talking about the Ephrata cloister as the extension of Francis Bacon's secret society, like the same people, the same organizations, the same things, and it's pointing it to Ephrata cloister. So how does this all connect? This is the beginning of the Cocalco Creek. Remember this, Cocalco Creek? The reason why this picture, this boulder field is taken is this is where the Cocalco Creek begins. And if you go on the Cocalco Creek, you can't see it, but underneath it you could hear the rumblings of the water. And this is where the Cocalco Creek begins. It goes all the way down here. And then right here is where the Ephrata cloister was founded, right on the Cocalco Creek. The Cocalco Creek then dies into this. It's called the Conestoga. If you've ever heard of the Conestoga wagon is what all the settlers used to go across the North America in the expansion of the United States. And the Conestoga goes all the way down here and empties right into here, right into the Susquehanna River at the exact location of the petroglyphs. Right here. This is it. This is where the Conestoga empties in. Let me see if I could zoom in. Right here, the Conestoga. Right here. This is where Big Indian and Little Indian Rock. All of this stuff lines up. They're pointing to this location of where the petroglyphs are. Both we see it from a Mesoamerican esoteric tradition, and we see it from a Rosicrucian tradition. All right. So you can go to the petroglyphs if you have a canoe or kayak, because they're on boulders in the river. But there's another location that has been identified, and it is much more accessible. And this is the Rosicrucian Invisible College and the Rose Cross. And so let's go here, and this is where we're going to wrap up. I mean, if you stuck around for this, and I hope you have, you're in for a real treat. So right here is where we find High Point Scenic Vista. This is High Point Scenic Vista. This is exactly the 40th parallel. This is the Susquehanna River. This is probably like a quarter mile at best from here to here. And this dot right here is 40 degrees, 0 minutes, and 6 seconds, which means it's 500 feet from this dotted line. Right here, this is it, High Point Scenic Vista. This is what it looks like from the top. It's just that. It's a scenic vista. You crawl it, you walk to the top, and you find this. And so it's a scenic vista. And this is what it looks like from a satellite view. And you're probably familiar with the symbol, for it's a crescent moon and a sun, which is the same symbol which is used by the same organization which we've been talking about, these same sort of Rosicrucians or mystics or medieval alchemists. It means probably a variety of different things. And we see that's what is set up right here at this secret location. And on top of that, we could see that High Point, it opened up, the park opened up in May 12, 2007. And on that same weekend, you see that May 11th through 13th on 2007, same weekend, Jamestown celebrated its anniversary. For it marked the 400th anniversary of the establishment of Jamestown. We've already identified Jamestown as the birthplace of both the British Empire and the United States. And for this 400th anniversary, Queen Elizabeth II, she came to it. She came to the 400th anniversary. And if you remember when we're talking about John Dee, he was the advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, and that's where the British Empire began. And Queen Elizabeth II comes here on the 400th anniversary at the same time that High Point opens up at the very location which is encoded in the Jamestown map, which is accredited to the leader and founder of the Jamestown settlement. All of this connects. And we might as well point this out, that from a Kabbalistic perspective, 400, which this is the 400th anniversary, 400 in gematria, where each letter has a numerical value. It's an alphanumerical code, and in Hebrew, the final letter is Tav, and Tav represents completion. 400 is the representation of completion, meaning that this signification right here, whatever was done upon the Susquehanna River, this 400-year operation, magical operation completed. For that's what all of this seems to symbolize on May 12th, 2007. So let's go take this even further. So why do I call this the Invisible College? The Rosicrucian Invisible College. So right here, this is where High Point Scenic Vista is. Remember, we looked at this map right here. Right here. Same map. This is the same map as we looked right here. We've got this a little bit zoomed out. Right here we find High Point Scenic Vista. If you look closely, that's where that center circle is. High Point Scenic Vista. We've got High Point Scenic Vista, and there's this perfect T-square. We've got Franklin and Marshall College right there. If you zoom in, you're going to see the little Masonic mortarboard cap. We got York College right here, and we got Elizabethtown College. Almost perfectly. The only thing that's not on the circle is Elizabethtown College. It's slightly off the circle of a T-square between these three colleges. The reason why this is important is because within the Rosicrucian concept, there's this thing called the Invisible College. The emblematic image of the Rosicrucian College, this written in 1612, the Invisible College of the Rosy Cross. Like whatever this nonsensical thing is, right? Now, there's all sorts of different meanings of what it may mean, but we do know that there is a phrase, a well phrase associated with the Invisible College. And so what we have right here in this sacred location, which is identified right here on the Susquehanna River on the 40th parallel, we have three colleges which are T-squared, which are T-squaring this High Point Scenic Vista. Not only that, each of these colleges have a correspondence within Rosicrucianism. First college is Franklin and Marshall College, established in 1787, named after Benjamin Franklin. And Benjamin Franklin was a Rosicrucian Mason. He was also a member of the American Philosophical Society. I'm not going to get into why that's a symbol, a representation of the Invisible College, but it is. And then we also have, on the next side, right here is York College. York College, it actually began as York County Academy, also established in 1787. And it was started by a member of, was started by John Adams, Reverend John Adams, different than the second vice president. He also connects to Ben Franklin. He was also a member of the American Philosophical Society. But York House, or York Academy, is also the name of the house which Francis Bacon lived in. Francis Bacon moved to York House, home of his father and Lord Keeper. Even more interesting is Lancaster and York. If you're familiar with the War of the Roses, so it's between Lancaster and York, albeit it's referring to the United Kingdom, these two cities in Pennsylvania are named after those two. Right in between the York, the Red City, the Red Rose City and the White Rose City, we find High Point Scenic Vista. And then the third college is Elizabethtown College, founded in 1899. And interestingly enough, at least this idea is presented by the head, Peter Dawkins, the head of, is it Peter Dawkins? Yeah, it's Peter Dawkins, who's the head of the Francis Bacon Research Trust. He says that Francis Bacon was actually the son of Queen Elizabeth I. She was known as the Virgin Queen, but she was known as the Virgin Queen by title because she was a symbol of the goddess, of the zodiacal sign of Queen Elizabeth was a living embodiment of the astrological symbol of the goddess Virgo. So she was called the Virgin Queen, which is where we get the name Virginia. But in all practicality, she wasn't a virgin by any stretch. And Francis Bacon was actually her son. But nonetheless, that's Elizabethtown College right here. So we see that we have this High Point Scenic Vista, which opened up hundreds of years, perfectly balanced between these three colleges, hundreds of years later. But the question is, where is the fourth college? And so the fourth college is actually 60 miles away. And I didn't discover this. A viewer who is familiar with this work, and his name escapes me right now, he brought this to my attention, and it's fascinating. The fourth college, and it lines up perfectly, is 60 miles away. And now what happens is this fourth college creates a rose cross. And this fourth college is Washington College, named for George Washington. It was founded in 1723, some 50 years before both Franklin and Marshall and York Academy. And we find it down here in Maryland. And we see this line goes from Elizabethtown College right there all the way down to Washington College. And unfortunately, the scale of Google Earth does not allow me to get this level of detail, so I'm going to have to show it to you by piecemeal. But this is where we can see this line begins. It's 70.14 miles. And the northern part is right here, right in between Elizabethtown College and the Masonic village of Elizabethtown. And that line goes right over here, which is High Point Scenic Vista. And it concludes right here at Washington College. And when we take them all together, we create right here a rose cross of four very symbolic and literal connections to the Rosicrucian fraternity, colleges, playing upon the Rosicrucian idea of an invisible college, but making a cross. And all of that is that energy, and what that represents is accessible right here. And so this area, this land, like, the land is just because, whether you want to say the Rosicrucians are bad guys or good guys, like, they don't own it. They marked it. They showed it for you. And so I'd like to conclude this video with a book which I wrote, a guidebook. This isn't a book of the history of the area. This book is a guidebook of what to do once you understand the history of the area. I wrote this in, I think it's copywritten 2017-18. And what it is it's a 24-page guidebook. And it is about 4 walks. There are areas right here, right here, right here, and right here. They are parks, if you are, nature preserves, which are accessible. And I describe the areas. I give maps of both how to get there and what to look for while you're there, and describe the metaphysical properties of each area. And so now that you have been, if you will, inducted into, initiated into the Susquehanna Mystery. For those of you who wish to experience it, and that could be for anyone who wants to come here physically and experience it with their physical bodies, or experience it more mystically, this book is available to you. And if you're interested, I think I've got like about 100 copies of it left. I printed it out. This is how you get it. PayPal me $30 or Venmo me $30. You can't buy this on Amazon. You can't buy this anywhere but through me. And I will ship it to you, include your shipping address. Certainly the PayPal is mkwan@comcast.net or Venmo at Michael-Wan. And so that's it, my friends. That is the Susquehanna Mystery. There's a lot there. I appreciate your patience, your curiosity, and willingness to delve into something which is unexplainable.